Have you ever watched someone get humiliated in public and thought, that person is going to surprise every single one of you? I have. And this story? This is one of those times. It was a Tuesday morning in downtown Vancouver when everything nearly fell apart at Hartwell Crane Investment Partners. The kind of morning where the sky sits low and gray over Burrard Inlet, the coffee in the boardroom has gone cold, and the most important client the firm has ever courted is sitting 32 floors up, staring out a floor-to-ceiling window, waiting. Nolan Fitch, 47, silver-templed, the kind of man who wore a Patek Philippe watch and made sure you noticed, stood at the head of the conference table straightening his tie for the fourth time in 6 minutes. He was the senior managing director of Hartwell Crane, and on any other day, Nolan Fitch was the most composed man in any room he entered. Not today. Today, seated across from him, was Wei Junlong. Wei Junlong was 61 years old, compact and unhurried, with close-cropped gray hair, and the particular stillness of a man who had never once needed to raise his voice to get what he wanted. He was the founder of Junlong Capital Group, a Shenzhen-based private equity firm managing somewhere north of $4 billion in assets. He had flown into Vancouver the night before on a private charter. He had requested green tea, room temperature water, and a table moved 6 inches to the left. All 3 requests had been accommodated before he sat down. What had not been accommodated was this. Wei Junlong spoke almost no English. His assistant, a young woman named Lu Fang, who had accompanied him on every major deal trip for the past 11 years, had come down with acute appendicitis somewhere over the Pacific. She was in a hospital in Richmond right now, recovering from emergency surgery, and Wei Junlong was sitting in a 43rd floor boardroom with a team of Canadian investment bankers who were quietly, professionally, catastrophically out of their depth. Hartwell Crane had retained a translation service. The confirmation email had arrived 3 weeks ago. The translator, a man named Gerald something, had called at 7:43 that morning to say his mother had had a stroke and he was on a flight to Toronto. He was sorry. He was very sorry. Nolan had spent the 18 minutes between that phone call and Wei Junlong's arrival trying every contact in his phone, a Mandarin professor at UBC who wasn't answering. A client in Richmond who spoke Cantonese, not Mandarin, not the same, he'd been told firmly. A translation app on his iPad that, when he'd tested it, had rendered, "We are delighted to welcome you to Vancouver," into something that made his junior associate Brittany Rao wince visibly. So there they sat. Nolan forced a smile across the table. Wei Junlong looked at him with the patience of a man who had seen this kind of scrambling before, and found it neither charming nor reassuring. The deal on the table was a co-investment structure worth $230 million. Hartwell Crane had been working toward this meeting for 14 months. 14 months of calls, of relationship-building dinners in Hong Kong, of courier-delivered gift baskets at Lunar New Year. 14 months, and it was all sitting in a room going nowhere because nobody could speak. Nolan looked at his watch, looked at Brittany, looked at the door. That was when he saw her. Marisol Tran was 26 years old, Vietnamese-Canadian, with thick dark hair pulled back in a practical knot, and the kind of face that people consistently assumed was younger than it was. She was wearing the gray uniform of the building's contracted cleaning service, the small embroidered logo of Clearview Facilities on her left chest pocket, sensible black shoes, a caddy of supplies in her right hand. She had come in through the service entrance at the far end of the hall to collect the previous meeting's coffee service before the next group needed the room. She did this every Tuesday. Nobody noticed her. That was, more or less, the point. She was about to back quietly out of the room when Nolan Fitch's voice stopped her. "Hey! Hey, you! Hold on!" Marisol paused. Nolan was already striding toward her. There was something a little unhinged about the way he moved, the walk of a man abandoning dignity in the direction of desperation. "Do you speak Mandarin?" he asked. The question came out half hopeful, half absurd, the way questions do when you already know the answer is going to be no. Marisol looked at him for a moment. Then she looked across the room at Wei Junlong, who had turned in his chair to observe this exchange with mild curiosity. Yes, she said. I do. Nolan blinked. You? What? I speak Mandarin. Her voice was quiet and entirely even. Do you need an interpreter? The room went very still. Brittany Rao, who had been checking her phone under the table, looked up. The two junior analysts sitting along the wall, boys in their mid-20s who had been looking at this situation the way you look at a car accident on the highway, both straightened. Nolan opened his mouth, closed it. Then, our translator canceled. We have a critical meeting happening right now with. He gestured vaguely toward Wei Junlong. He doesn't speak English. I understand, Marisol said. She set her supply caddy down against the wall, carefully and without drama. She smoothed the front of her uniform. She walked across the boardroom, past the analysts, past Brittany, past Nolan Fitch, who had not moved, and she stopped a respectful distance from Wei Junlong's chair. She spoke. 您好，魏先生，我是玛丽索尔，我很荣幸今天能为您担任翻译，请问您现在需要什么? The effect on Wei Junlong was immediate and remarkable. The careful blankness he had maintained for the last 40 minutes shifted. Something in his face opened, he replied. Not the careful, truncated sentences he might have used with someone who only half understood, but naturally at full speed with the ease of a man who had finally found solid ground. Marisol listened, nodded. She turned to Nolan. He says he appreciates your patience this morning. He'd like to begin with a review of the term sheet, specifically the co-investment waterfall structure. He has 3 questions about the preferred return threshold that he'd like addressed before he's willing to proceed. Nolan stared at her. Then he said very quietly, Okay, yes, sit down, please. Here is what nobody in that room knew about Marisol Tran. She had grown up in Burnaby, the second child of a Vietnamese mother and a Taiwanese father. Her father, Keng Wei Tran, had immigrated to Canada in 1991 with a degree in civil engineering from National Taiwan University and approximately $400 in his pocket. He had worked construction for 6 years before his credentials were recognized. During those 6 years, he had spoken to Marisol and her older brother exclusively in Mandarin at home. Because he believed, with the conviction of a man who had learned things the hard way, that a language was a door, and you gave your children as many doors as you could. Marisol had grown up bilingual in Mandarin and English, with enough Vietnamese to manage her mother's side of the family at Tate. She had gone on to study finance at Simon Fraser University, graduated with honors, written her CFA Level I exam the spring of her final year. And then her father had had his first heart attack. He survived. But the recovery was long, and the disability payments were not enough, and her mother had never worked outside the home, and her brother Barrow was already stretched thin with his own young family in Coquitlam. So Marisol had deferred the career she'd planned. She'd taken the Clearview Facilities job because it paid $14 more per hour than any retail position and allowed her to work shifts around her father's medical appointments. That had been 8 months ago. She had not told anyone at Clearview that she had a finance degree. She had not told anyone that she was fluent in Mandarin. She had learned early in life not to offer things to rooms that hadn't asked for them. She sat at the end of Hartwell and Crane's polished boardroom table in her gray uniform, with her cleaning supplies parked against the wall, and she interpreted. She was good. She was not just functionally good, she was exceptionally, technically good. When Wei Junlong raised his first question about the preferred return threshold, he did so with the particular shorthand of a man who spent his days inside the language of private equity. He used terms that had no direct English equivalent, referenced structural conventions specific to mainland Chinese fund agreements, compared the proposed waterfall to a deal he'd done in 2019 in a way that assumed familiarity with that entire transaction. Marisol didn't just translate the words. She translated the meaning. She flagged for Nolan when Wei Junlong's phrasing suggested a hard line versus an opening position. She said at one point, He's not asking a question, he's telling you what he needs. The phrasing is a courtesy. Nolan adjusted his response accordingly. When Wei Junlong made a remark that landed as a joke to anyone who understood it, Marisol smiled before she translated it. Then she translated it, and everyone else laughed, and the temperature in the room, which had been hovering somewhere between tense and dire, shifted. By 11:15, they were deep in the substance of the deal. By noon, Wei Junlong had asked for a lunch break, and Nolan had arranged for food to be brought up. By 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the term sheet had been marked up, the key points of agreement were documented, and Wei Junlong's lawyer, reached by video from Shenzhen, had been briefed. Wei Junlong stood to leave at 2:47. He shook Nolan's hand. He shook Brittany's hand. He shook the hands of both junior analysts, who looked like they might actually vibrate out of their shoes. Then he turned to Marisol. He said something to her in Mandarin. He said it slowly, and with a formality that made everyone in the room understand, even without translation, that it was significant. Brittany leaned over to Marisol. What did he say? Marisol was quiet for a moment. He said, "You have your father's manner, he taught you well." The room was quiet. Then Wei Junlong nodded once, picked up his briefcase, and left. Nolan Fitch stood in the boardroom for a long time after everyone else had filed out. Marisol had collected her supply caddy from the wall and was making her way toward the service exit. Her shift had technically ended 40 minutes ago. "Wait," Nolan said. She waited. He walked to her. He stopped a few feet away, and for a moment he just looked at her, really looked, probably for the first time all day. "What's your name?" "Your full name, Marisol Tran, Marisol." He paused. "Where did you learn to speak Mandarin like that? That wasn't just conversational. You understood the financial terminology. You understood the way he was positioning things. That was professional interpretation." Marisol looked at him steadily. "My father taught me Mandarin. SFU gave me the finance. I put them together today." Nolan was quiet. Then, "You have a finance background. I have a finance degree. CFA level I. 8 months of cleaning offices." Something moved across his face. It wasn't pity. It was the specific expression of a person recalibrating, rapidly, the assumptions they had been operating on all day. "Why are you working for Clearview?" she told him. Not everything. Not the full weight of it. Not the night she had sat in the hospital parking lot and cried because she didn't know how they were going to manage the mortgage payment and her father's medication in the same month. Just the shape of it. Her father's heart. The gap that needed filling. The job that paid what it paid. Nolan listened. He didn't interrupt. When she finished, he said, "I have a position opening in 2 weeks. Junior analyst. It's not glamorous. It's grunt work, financials modeling, long hours. But it pays well, and our people move fast here if they're good." He paused. "You're good." Marisol looked at him. "I have a cleaning shift tomorrow." "I know. I'll have to give notice. I'll have to arrange things at home. I can't just take the week," he said. "Email me your CV. We'll figure out the rest." He held out a card. His personal one, not the generic firm card, the one with his direct line. Marisol took it. She looked at it for a moment, and then she put it in the pocket of her gray uniform, next to the embroidered Clearview logo on her chest. And she picked up her supply caddy, and she walked out through the service door. The thing about that day, and I want to be clear about this because I've thought about it a lot, is that nobody asked Marisol Tran for her resume before they needed her. Nobody thought to ask. She'd been in that building every Tuesday for 8 months. She'd cleaned that boardroom. She'd wiped down that conference table where Wei Junlong sat, and a $230 million deal nearly dissolved because nobody could talk to each other. She had walked past Nolan Fitch in the hallway more times than either of them could count, and he had never once looked at her. Really looked. Because why would he? She was in a gray uniform with a cart of cleaning supplies. The visual language was completely unambiguous, and it told him everything he thought he needed to know. "We do this. We all do this. We see the uniform, the age, the face, the circumstances, and we construct a complete person out of that, and we get it wrong so consistently it should embarrass us more than it does. Marisol wasn't invisible because she was hiding. She was invisible because the people around her had decided, without ever saying so out loud, that she wasn't worth seeing. She emailed Nolan her CV 4 days later on a Saturday afternoon. He called her within the hour. She started at Hartwell Crane 3 weeks after the day she interpreted a $230 million deal in a cleaning uniform. Her salary was 3 times what Clearview had paid her. Her father's medications were covered. Her mother cried on the phone when Marisol told her, and Marisol sat in her car in the parking lot of the Save-On Foods on Hastings Street and cried a little too, though she would not have admitted that to anyone. Brittany Rao, who had watched the whole thing from the other side of the table, became one of Marisol's closest allies at the firm. She was the one who later told Marisol what Nolan had said to the partners that evening, after Wei Junlong left. He said, "We almost lost the biggest deal of this firm's decade because we walked past the right person every Tuesday for 8 months without once asking her name." He said it in a partners' meeting, in front of everyone. It didn't undo anything, but it mattered. As for Wei Junlong, the deal closed 11 weeks later. Junlong Capital Group became Hartwell Crane's largest single investor, and the relationship that developed from that co-investment led to 2 more transactions in the following 18 months. In the cover letter for the second transaction, a formal letter on heavy stock, sent by courier from Shenzhen. Wei Junlong's office included a note, in Mandarin, addressed specifically to Marisol. Her colleague Kevin, who did not read Mandarin, held it up and squinted at it. "Can you tell what it says?" Marisol read it. She smiled, set it down, picked up her coffee. "He says he hopes my father is well." He was. He was doing better. Marisol Tran had spent 8 months being looked through, and then on a gray Tuesday morning in downtown Vancouver, the room finally had to see her. She didn't flinch. She didn't gloat. She just sat down at that table in her gray uniform and did what she had always been capable of doing. That's the thing about people the world decides not to notice. They don't stop being exceptional just because no one's paying attention. They wait. They show up. And when the moment comes, and the moment always comes, they are ready. I've been thinking about this story all week, and I keep coming back to one question. How many Marisols are out there right now? How many people are being walked past every single day because of what they're wearing, or where they're working, or what their circumstances look like from the outside? If this story hit you the way it hit me, leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you were underestimated, or tell me about a time you almost underestimated someone and caught yourself. I read every single one. If you're new to Dell Stories, subscribe. We're here every week with stories about the people who surprise us, the moments that change things, and the quiet kind of strength that doesn't ask for applause. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, share it with them. We'll see you next week.